Are we actually witnessing another Kardashian marriage crumble right in front of our eyes, or are we watching the beginning of something far darker than the public even realizes? Because the way this new blind item is detonating across the internet, it has Kourtney Kardashian looking quietly terrified, and Travis Barker looking more suspicious with every passing hour. The allegation spiraling through TikTok and Instagram right now claims that he has been sneaking around with a girl barely older than his 19-year-old daughter, Alabama, and the internet is not taking this lightly. And the timing? The timing could not possibly be worse for their public image. The moment fans began digging into Travis's past, old interviews, old social media posts, old comments, everything started to feel unsettlingly familiar. It is almost as if the puzzle pieces were always there, scattered in plain sight, waiting for someone bold enough to put them together. Honestly, do not be surprised if Kourtney already knows exactly who this mystery girl is, and is choosing silence over scandal because her entire brand, her motherhood, her marriage, her reputation, all of it hangs in the balance. Meanwhile, fans are stitching together timelines, comparing screenshots, and claiming that the coincidences are lining up a little too perfectly to ignore. The entire internet uproar began the moment Crazy Days and Nights dropped that blind item on November 10th. The post basically said, this reality star, known by everyone, is being cheated on by her significant other with someone not much older than his daughter. And that single sentence was enough to ignite a social media wildfire. Within minutes of TikTok creators grabbing the story, users began doing the math. Alabama Barker is 19. Meaning whoever this alleged girl is, she is essentially his daughter's peer. The same age. The same generation. And that detail alone sent fans spiraling into betrayal theories, timeline breakdowns, and frantic comment wars, all asking the same question, is this really happening again? The internet did not even need a full 24 hours to decide who that mystery reality star might be. It was almost eerie how fast the speculation spread. And then, out of nowhere, every single one of Travis Barker's picture-perfect, carefully maintained comments began disappearing like someone had hit a silent panic button. People were pulling up screenshots, stitching old interviews, and posting receipts faster than his team could blink, because apparently Travis being unfaithful is not breaking news to anyone except the people who desperately wanted to believe he had changed. One user wrote, of course he is, with the kind of exhausted energy you see when the internet is not shocked anymore, just disappointed. Another comment said, he has been a cheater his entire life. He literally wrote about it in his books, if I remember correctly. And that was the moment the mood shifted. This was not petty gossip. This was not exaggeration. People were quoting his own words, the things he proudly published, the things he bragged about, the things he never thought would come back to haunt him. And suddenly all the dots that fans had ignored for years began to connect like a neon crime board. His memoir reads less like a story about growth and more like a highlight reel of chaos. Page after page, he openly describes cheating as if it was just another casual Tuesday on tour, juggling multiple women without hesitation, and narrating it with the kind of confidence that feels more disturbing the more you think about it. There is no guilt in his tone, no self-awareness, no moment of reflection. He writes about it like he is documenting a wild adventure, like infidelity was some kind of personal accessory he carried everywhere. And for people rereading those passages now, it is uncomfortable, almost chilling, how casually he normalized things that would destroy anyone else's life. The part that sent social media into absolute meltdown was the story he once told about the time he was recovering in the hospital after the plane crash. His emails were left open on his laptop, and the truth came spilling out like a flood. Not one mistake. Not a minor slip. We are talking about years of conversations with different women. He even admitted that he was involved with 13 different girls in one single year while pretending to be in committed relationships. 13. Most people will not speak to 13 potential partners in a decade, but he was stacking them like collectibles, building entire parallel lives while his partners thought they were safe, loved, and exclusive. The emotional gap between what his partners believed and what he was actually doing was so massive it felt cruel. And then there is the part nobody ever forgets. He admitted he was cheating on his first wife before they were even married. Before rings, before vows, before any promises were officially made. They were planning a future together while he was busy breaking every unspoken rule behind the scenes. His bachelor party, according to his own friends, was not a celebration, it was a full-scale disaster. They described dozens of women everywhere, the entire night spiraling with zero boundaries, zero conscience, zero emotional control. And rather than deny it or express regret, he wrote about it proudly, almost like he believed fans would find it edgy or entertaining. It was not a confession. It was a performance. A highlight. A badge of honor. And that is what made people so uneasy. The casualness. The bragging. The fact that he treated emotional destruction like normal behavior. But nothing, absolutely nothing, reignited the conversation like the infamous Kim Kardashian chapter. The moment that section resurfaced, social media exploded all over again. He wrote openly about checking Kim out back when she was organizing closets and tagging along with Paris Hilton. He described how mesmerized he felt, how he kept bringing her up to his assistant, how something about her captured him completely. And this was not just a passing comment, he dedicated an entire section to her, describing her presence, her energy, the way she carried herself, almost like he was admitting he tried to pursue something. The problem? He was not single. And Kim was very close to Paris. His assistant literally warned him, telling him to be careful because this kind of attention could explode into massive drama, and apparently, it did. Behind the scenes, Paris found out. Tension rose. Arguments happened. Things got messy in ways fans never fully understood until his memoir spelled it out with unsettling honesty. And that is why when people drag up his past today, it is not because they want to dig up old scandals. It is because the pattern never stopped. The impulsiveness. The cheating. The lack of emotional responsibility. It shows up again and again in every chapter of his timeline like a repeating glitch he never bothered to fix. He talks about wanting love, stability, emotional connection, yet his actions show a man making reckless decisions in the dark and then romanticizing the aftermath like he is a misunderstood rock star instead of an adult who refuses to deal with the consequences of his choices. His environment, his fame, the adoration around him, it all fed into a mindset where he believed he could do anything, hurt anyone, rewrite the story later, and expect the world to move on. In the end, when people online say, "Travis has always been like this," they are not exaggerating. They are echoing the exact story he told the world himself. His own patterns. His own receipts. His own legacy of chaos. What hit people the hardest was not the chaos, not the cheating, not the controversy, it was the heartbreaking fact that some of the women in Travis Barker's past genuinely cared about him. These were not all impulsive flings or nameless situationships. Some were long-term partners who stood by him through addictions, cross-country tours, family tragedies, and near-death trauma. They were loving him, supporting him, believing in him, while he was quietly choosing betrayal every single time. And the most haunting part is that he acknowledges all of this in his writing, but he does it with the emotional detachment of someone narrating a documentary, not someone confessing to real human suffering. It feels less like regret and more like observation, as if he is describing someone else's pain, not the pain he caused. The plane crash was supposed to be his great awakening, the moment that changed his core, the moment he reevaluated his priorities and his identity. And while it shaped him in profound ways, it did not erase the years of destruction that had been quietly accumulating beneath the surface. His laptop, sitting there in that hospital room, became a time capsule of every secret conversation, every hidden message, every "do not worry about her" lie he told to keep the peace. And when his partner scrolled through those emails, it was not a crack in the relationship, it was a flood. Each message was a punch in the stomach, a reminder that the love she thought she had was something he had been fracturing behind the scenes long before the crash. It was the moment she realized the trauma did not just break him, it exposed him. Years later, when the internet talks about his dating history, they do not have to rely on rumors. They have excerpts, screenshots, interviews, and his own memoir spelling out every detail with the kind of honesty that feels almost weaponized. That is why every time a rumor surfaces, people do not react with shock, they react with recognition. When they say, "Travis has always been like this," they are not being hateful. They are being literal. They are quoting him back to himself. And the Kim Kardashian chapter, people circle back to it for one reason: it was not harmless. It was not a cute little anecdote. It was a cultural earthquake hiding inside a memoir. That era was already fragile: Paris Hilton and Kim navigating fame, early reality television, shifting alliances. Into that chaos walked Travis, openly mesmerized by Kim, writing about her energy, her beauty, her presence with a fascination that had consequences. His assistant warned him. His friends warned him. The social dynamics were complicated enough, but he leaned into it anyway. And years later, the fact that he is now married to Kim's sister makes the resurfacing of that chapter feel even more explosive. People look back and think, wait, all of this was happening before the fame even hit? And the answer is yes. Seeds of chaos planted long before the public even knew the Kardashian name. Fans cannot ignore the fact that he included Kim in a memoir that was supposedly about trauma, music, and survival. He chose to highlight her with detail and emphasis, revealing volumes about how his mind worked, how he crossed emotional boundaries, and how blurred loyalty was for him. That is why people keep dragging that chapter out of the archives. It is not about Kim herself, it is about what that moment symbolizes in the timeline of his behavior. Some people insist he has changed. Others swear he has not. But nobody can argue with the fact that his past is not blurry. It is documented. Thoroughly. Permanently. And every time a new rumor surfaces, people do not need imagination. They need memory. Because his past is loud enough to echo into his present. So when that recent blind item dropped, suggesting he might be sneaking around again, nobody needed time to process. They were not jumping to conclusions. They were connecting patterns. The timing, the behavior, the energy, every piece mirrored the shape of things he had done before. It was like watching an old puzzle being reassembled with new edges. And suddenly, Kourtney Kardashian's past with Scott Disick began resurfacing too, because the universe has a dark sense of humor. For years, Kourtney has poured patience, loyalty, and emotional labor into men who gave her storms in return. And this rumor did not feel random. It felt familiar. Painfully familiar. As if she had walked from one exhausting mess straight into another. And then, as if the internet wanted to rub salt into the fresh wound, a moment from the Kardashians began circulating again. A scene where Kourtney and Travis run a race together. She keeps telling him she needs to slow down. She does not feel prepared. She is not warmed up. Her body cannot push at the pace he wants to set. But Travis keeps going, not out of malice, not out of disregard, but out of a deeply ingrained truth about him: he is fast. He is intense. He thrives on extremes. And he does not always adjust to the softer rhythm that Kourtney naturally gravitates toward. Watching that moment with fresh eyes, after the blind item, after the resurfaced Memoir quotes, after the internet chaos, people began seeing their dynamic differently. Kourtney is not someone who wants chaos. She has always craved calm, stability, grounding. Even with Scott, the core of her heartbreak was the instability. She has always wanted someone who matches her softness, not someone who pulls her into emotional storms she never asked for. So when viewers rewatched her trying to keep up with Travis, not just in the race, but in their entire relationship, they began wondering whether she had once again stepped into someone else's world instead of being with someone who naturally fits into hers. People began replaying that race moment like detectives reviewing security footage. They analyzed the tone of Kourtney's voice when she said she needed to slow down. It was not dramatic. It was not for the cameras. It was the fragile honesty of someone who knew her limits and dared to express them. Her voice carried a softness layered with truth, a quiet boundary. And Travis, lost in adrenaline, excitement, and that signature intensity, just kept going. Not cruelly. Not thoughtlessly. But fast. Too fast. And suddenly, when that clip resurfaced beside the cheating rumors, beside the documented patterns, beside the history written in his own words, it no longer looked like a cute moment. It looked like a metaphor. A visual representation of the entire relationship. One person racing with fire in his veins, and the other trying to breathe without losing herself in the smoke. And people remembered something they always noticed about Kourtney: she changes depending on who stands beside her. With Scott, she became the parent in the relationship, the grounded one, the emotional anchor trying to keep a sinking ship from dragging her under. With Eunice, she softened, becoming freer, lighter, almost as if trying to reclaim the youth she missed while raising 3 children in chaos. And with Travis, she transformed again, embracing spontaneous trips, bold aesthetics, public displays of affection, and the rock and roll world that has always moved at the speed of a heartbeat in overdrive. At first, it was electric. The chemistry, the intensity, the passion, it felt like a renaissance for her. But slowly, those tiny mismatches, those clashing energies, those differences in emotional pacing became impossible to ignore. So when the blind item dropped, it did not fall onto clean, empty ground. It landed on a foundation built from years of public history, fragmented timelines, resurfaced Memoir chapters, and unresolved questions that fans had been whispering about for a decade. People love patterns. They love seeing the storyline repeat because it makes the present easier to understand. And this rumor felt like a sequel nobody wanted, but everybody recognized. Online discussions exploded, turning into emotional battlegrounds. Some insisted Travis had changed, that sobriety, fatherhood, and near-death transformation reshaped him into someone new. Others argued that a person can evolve, but the echo of their past never fully disappears. It clings. It shadows. It influences how the world interprets every new rumor. And in this case, the echo was so loud it drowned out every attempt at defending him. Then the deeper layer emerged. The emotional layer. The part where strangers were not just talking about celebrities, they were talking about themselves. Women who dated chaotic partners. Women who forgave too many times. Women who mistook intensity for compatibility. Women who ran emotional marathons behind men who never once turned around to check if they were falling behind. Watching Kourtney in that race, saying she needed to slow down, brought back memories for thousands of people who had been in that same emotional position, breathless, unheard, and trying not to shatter under the weight of someone else's pace. The internet can be ruthless, but it can also be brutally perceptive. And in this case, it saw something bigger than gossip. It saw a pattern repeating itself. It saw a woman who deserves peace once again orbiting a partner who has lived most of his life in chaos. It saw history whispering warnings from the background, reminding everyone that you cannot outrun the truth of who someone has been unless they have fully confronted it themselves. People dug up old interviews where Travis described himself as addicted to chaos. They revisited past relationships where he moved quickly, emotionally, physically, romantically, without giving the other person space to catch their breath. They remembered his reputation for chasing intensity, for falling fast, for burning through relationships like a bonfire that always ends in soot. Then they looked at Kourtney, someone who values emotional safety, stillness, grounding, and suddenly the mismatch became glaring. The conversation shifted from "did he cheat" to "does this dynamic even make sense for her?" And that question opened a door that fans had avoided for a long time because it forced them to examine the difference between passion and peace. A relationship can be filled with romantic gestures, public devotion, dramatic declarations, and still have an imbalance simmering under the surface. As more people rewatched the race clip, they noticed something new: the way Kourtney's voice strained when she asked to slow down. Not anger. Not annoyance. Just strain. The strain of a woman trying to be supportive while quietly begging not to betray her own needs. That is why the clip went viral. Because it was subtle. It was human. It was real. It was the kind of moment that happens in every relationship where one person's pace becomes the other person's burden. And with the cheating rumor hovering like a storm cloud that refused to drift away, the entire narrative shifted. It became deeper. More symbolic. More emotionally layered. People began asking whether Kourtney spent her life molding herself to fit other people's worlds instead of finding someone who naturally aligned with hers. Whether she had mistaken intensity for devotion. Whether she was running a metaphorical race she never asked to enter. But the part that shook people the most was the silence. Not dramatic silence. Not PR silence. Just silence. The kind that makes the public fill in the blanks with fears, assumptions, and déjà vu. The kind of silence that lets rumors grow legs and run. And in the absence of denial, clarification, or reassurance, the internet did what it always does: it built its own story. A story made from patterns, past mistakes, symbolic moments, mismatched rhythms, and a relationship that shines beautifully on the surface, but might be quietly unraveling beneath the spotlight. And this is exactly why the rumor did not feel random. It did not feel manufactured. It did not feel like some bored internet troll stitched a story together for attention. It felt like the next chapter in a timeline that has been messy, emotional, tangled, and unresolved for years. A timeline filled with intensity, miscommunication, old wounds, and two people moving at completely different emotional speeds. Whether the cheating actually happened or not almost became secondary. The real conversation, the one that made the internet hold its breath, was the pattern. The emotional pattern that has surrounded Kourtney Kardashian's relationships for over a decade, no matter how desperately she tries to rewrite her story. And as all of this resurfaced online, that tiny